Hey, and welcome back to another video from my Vintage Tech Showcase playlist, the playlist of videos where I showcase older electronic devices in a form of retro review. And you must be wondering, what in hell do you have in front of your eyes here? What sort of wreck is that? And I agree, this phone is a wreck. But what it is a Sony Xperia M2 Aqua from 2014. Now this phone holds a special place on this channel because this was one of my first repair videos on this channel, which you can find up here, me repairing this phone. It was somewhat water damaged and I repaired it. You can find the video up there. This video is basically that video is what gave me confidence into thinking my repair videos are up to par to YouTube standards and that people actually like to watch my repair videos. It's that video that I showed you earlier. It basically kickstarted my repair video and basically repair tutorials here on YouTube, and basically showed me that the videos that I make are actually good. So it was actually one of my first repair videos, and like I said, you can go check it out. If you're going to check it out later, it's up on my channel, but I'll also link it down in the description below. So like I said, Sony Xperia M2 Aqua, kind of a few years after the Ericsson branding went off. This is purely designed by Sony, and it was a mid-range phone from 2014, and we'll be taking a closer look at it right now. But before we jump right in, don't forget to smash that like button as always, and don't forget to also hit that subscribe button if you like what you see and you want to see more content from me. Also, check out my social media down in the description below, which includes Instagram, Discord, and Twitter as well. And now, let's jump right into this retro review. Okay, so first let's have a quick go around of the phone, and I know it's unpleasant to look at because I really didn't have the time to restore this thing, but I may do in the future, so just bear with me a bit. So we have the display up front, which we'll be talking about in a bit, Sony branding, the speaker grill, front camera, and the microphone is here at the bottom. There's like a cutout for the microphone. You can put your finger there. That's the front. On this side of the phone, we have the standard good old Sony power button, a classic Sony design. It's very tactile and it feels really good. Probably one of the, if not the best feeling power button designs ever. We also have the volume rockers over here and the camera shutter button, half press to focus, full press to take a photo. We have our expansion over here, micro SD, and our SIM card slot, along with one water damage indicator. That water damage indicator, as you saw, is still white, so it has not gone off. This thing was partially water damaged, so the water damage indicator on this side is what went off. As you can see there with the micro USB port, that one went off and it affected the touchscreen. So when I cleaned it out with rubbing alcohol, if you may have seen in that video, the touchscreen started working. At the bottom, we have nothing much. This rubber panel-like thing fell off. That was very common with the older Sonys. The rubber panels used to fall off. We have a lanyard strap here, down here. You can put your lanyard through there, bring it out here. That's all that's at the bottom. At the top, again, there's nothing. This piece of rubber is also falling off, so I've pasted it down with tape. Nothing else at the top. And finally, at the back, again, the back is also falling off. Let me kind of show you. I have not pasted it in place. As you can see, the back is just pasted with tape. Sony branding, Xperia branding, NFC branding, single LED flash, microphone for video recording, and the 8-megapixel shooter, which we'll be discussing in the rest of this video. But until then, that was just a quick go around of the phone itself. So the display on this thing, like a lot of Sony phones back in the day, despite its low resolution, was actually one of the best mid-range displays at the time, back in 2014. It is a IPS LCD display, and again, as you can see, it is pretty reflective. You can see my camera over there. It's pretty reflective, an IPS LCD display. I've not seen IPS LCD displays this reflective. You could technically you can legit use that as a mirror, but whatever. Anyway, so the display is an IPS LCD panel, IPS LCD technology, 4.8 inches, 540 pixels by 960 pixels, so 540 by 960, 16 by 9 aspect ratio, 229 pixels per inch, and it has a scratch resistant glass. It's not Gorilla Glass, but it's still probably a lightly coated scratch resistant glass. As you can see, it is actually still a pretty usable display in 2021. I'd easily go with this display, no problem. I should actually do a video on using this phone in 2021. But a pretty decent looking display. Let me bring up some wallpapers. As you can see here, there's a bunch of wallpapers, a bunch of colors, darker colors. This actually looks really nice. Fun fact, I actually used this phone for about 3 months or 4 months to talk to my girlfriend, because I turn off my main phone at night, and to speak to her, I have always a separate phone so that I'm not bothered by anyone else, and I only speak to her with that. Then I used this for about 3 to 4 months. Then I switched to the Motorola E5 Plus. But this phone was perfectly usable when I was using it at the time, and I can assume it's perfectly usable now as well. And as you can see, the colors are pretty nice on this thing. So overall, a pretty decent display. And I took it out earlier to take photos for the photo samples, and the brightness actually helped a lot in bright lighting conditions. The outdoor performance is also really good. So thumbs up for the display. A really good display from 2014. Probably one of the best mid-range displays at the time, as the reviews said, and I'd happily use this for a couple of days here in 2021, because I did use it for 4 months in 2020. So thumbs up to the display there. Usually Sony displays are one of the best. Now let's move on to the software. So initially, the Xperia M2 Aqua shipped with Android 4.4.2 KitKat, and as you can see, its final update is 5.1.1 Lollipop. So one major update. This was quite common for Sony phones at the time, and even today, Sony sells premium phones such as the really popping these days. Everyone's talking about the new Sony Xperia Mark III, 2, or whatever the hell they call it. I didn't really look into it. But that phone, apparently the camera is excellent on that thing. But the only issue that people are talking about is, are they gonna update it more than 2 times? Now, phones like this got 1 update or no update at the time. But a major issue with Sony phones, a major issue that a lot of people stopped buying Sony phones, a major reason why a lot of people stopped buying Sony phones is because of the updates. Sony did not really like giving these things updates. They always wanted to push the newer models, and these were not locked onto any carriers, by the way. This one is, but most of them were not. But Sony was quite hesitant to give updates, so a lot of people really went over to Samsung and Nexus and Pixel, etc., because there was better updates there. Even Samsung had better updates than Sony. Surprise, surprise. I've criticized Samsung in the past, but they were much better than Sony when it came to updates. So 4.4.2 KitKat, upgradable to 5.1.1 Lollipop. As you can see, old school Sony interface. Let me change the wallpaper back to something less, well, that's green. Let's keep it like that. Okay, so, the previous wallpaper was nice. It's the Sony theme wallpaper for 2014 to 16-ish. So as you can see, your classic Android 5.1.1 Lollipop. It's actually quite snappy here in 2021. It's not so snappy. If I connect it to the Wi-Fi, it starts slowing down quite a lot, but not too much either. I have not, for the sake of this review, I have not connected it to the Wi-Fi. But it does slow down quite a bit, but it's not too bad. This phone is actually quite usable in 2021, and there is a XDA page that allows you, that there's a tutorial how to upgrade this thing to Android 6 Marshmallow, but I'm not going to do that. It's unofficial. But if you wish to do that, if you have this phone, you can go ahead and do that. But anyway, as you can see, your old school 5.1.1 Lollipop, pretty snappy, pretty basic old school Android, perfectly usable in 2021 if you can get around the slight slowness and the lack of certain apps. So looking under the hood to see what powers the M2 Aqua, we can see that it is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon MSM 8926, which is the Snapdragon 400 built on a 28 nanometer scale. And this MSM 8926 is the 8926-2, the Dash 2 variant for the M2 Aqua. So obviously these processors had many variations, and this phone has the MSM 8926-2. Again, Snapdragon 400, 28 nanometer scale. It is a quad-core processor clocked in at 1.2 gigahertz. And it was more than enough to power this phone back in the day, and it still, like I showed you earlier in the software section, it still is pretty darn snappy, and it will open apps and stuff pretty fast, even with Wi-Fi connected. But again, like I said, the Wi-Fi does slow it down a bit. Pretty decent processor for the time. It was a mid-range processor, and it obviously got the job done pretty well. It also has an Adreno 305 as its GPU. So Adreno 305 as its GPU. It has 1 gig of RAM, and it has 8 gigs of internal memory, as well as a micro SD card expansion slot. So 1 gig of RAM for 2014, pretty basic stuff for a mid-range phone. There were easily phones with 3 and 4 gigs of RAM at the time. Well, not 3 and 4, but definitely 2 and 3. 1 gig of RAM was pretty standard for a mid-range phone at the time. Again, not a beast in any way, but it didn't have to be. It was a mid-range phone. Now you get what you pay for. And as you can see, it is still holding up pretty well in 2021. And when I used it in 2020, a lot of the apps that I ran on it, including WhatsApp and a couple of games, which, do I still have those games? Now it seems like I've deleted them. A couple of the games that I installed on this thing, here's their flow free. There was a tower defense game that I played on this thing. It was quite intensive. It wasn't too intensive, but it was quite intensive. It's kind of a tower defense kind of game. That thing ran perfectly on this phone. So these specs hold up quite well in 2021 if you're okay with the slight slowness and not expecting to play too many rough titles and run too many powerful apps on this. So perfectly decent specs for the time, pretty okay for 2021. Okay, so now we can move on to the cameras, and we can start off with the rear camera. And again, I'm sorry for the sticky tape. It has to stay there to keep the phone from falling apart. So again, I'm sorry about that. It's kind of annoying to look at, I know, but I apologize. The rear camera, as you can see, by looking at it, you can tell it's not a cheap, fixed focus, crappy camera. It is indeed a very good camera. It's an 8 megapixel shooter with an f2.4 aperture and an autofocus. It has a single LED flash, and it has an HDR feature as well as panorama as well. It can shoot video at 1080p at 30 FPS with HDR turned on. So for a mid-range shooter from 2014, this was definitely in the higher mid-range. This camera shoots some really good images that I am perfectly happy with in 2021. You should, when I do post the samples in a bit, you'll see what I mean. This camera is amazing. Again, with relevance to 2014. Now, there are mid-range and low-range phones that could easily beat this phone from 2021. But take it with relevance to 2014 when I say this is an amazing camera. And you'll see a bit more of that camera in a bit when I put the samples up. The front camera is a simple VGA camera, and it can record video at 480p, and that's about it. I'll put a couple of samples from that as well. So now let's move on to the samples from the rear camera and the video from the rear camera as well. Shot at 1080p at 30 FPS with the HDR turned on, obviously. And like I said, I'll also include some selfies from the front camera. So as you saw with those samples, the photos are actually really nice, huh? I was also surprised by that. I mean, for a mid-range phone from 2014, that is a huge thumbs up. And again, look at it if you were the owner from 2014. Don't look at it from a 2021 perspective. That's not the way you should be looking at things. But amazing camera nevertheless. Sony was competing in the mid-range with Nokia and Samsung at the time. Apple was not there in the mid-range. Only recently they started selling phones in the mid-range. So Apple was out of the picture at the time. So Sony, Samsung, LG, Nokia mainly. Nokia was technically winning all the time, but still, this was also a pretty damn good contender. So big thumbs up for the camera department there. So now let's move on to all the additional features, and we'll start off with the water resistance on this phone. Now, as you can see with the state of this phone, it is nowhere near any more water resistant. All these flaps, though they're still there, most of them have lost their rubber coating and stuff, and they're no longer water resistant. It's been years since this phone has ever thought of going in the drink. But the water resistance on this thing is a IP68 rating, IP68 dust and water resistance, for up to 1.5 meters for 30 minutes. So 1.5 meters for 30 minutes, IP68 dust and water resistance, hence the term M2 Aqua. There was a standard phone also just called the M2. That thing was not water resistant. The standard M2 was not water resistant. The M2 Aqua was the one that was water resistant. Hence the name M2 Aqua. I initially thought this thing was, like, I believe in that previous video, the repair video, I initially thought this thing was a standard M2, but it turns out it was an M2 Aqua. The flaps and stuff are long gone, so like, well, most of the flaps are there. Well, yeah, all the flaps are there. Yeah, the flaps on this phone are there. They're just no longer water resistant, and the back is coming off and stuff. But Sony, people were making memes about Sony phones because they all could be taken swimming and etc, etc. They were mainly focused on photography and water resistance, and this phone was a mid-range phone that also excelled in those aspects. Apart from the water resistance, it had a bunch of other features. Nothing surprising, like nothing major to put it away from any other phone, not to differentiate it from any other phone, but it still had a bunch of other features, such as a USB on the go feature, so you could plug your USB into this phone. Not all phones could do that at the time. A lot of Android phones could, but not all Android phones could, especially lower and mid-range phones. You had to kind of like mod the phone a bit for the USB on the go to work. So this thing had USB OTG as well, a bunch of sensors, etc, etc. It came in black, white, and copper as well, the colors. This one is black, as you can see. The battery on this thing, again, another good feature of this phone. I read on older reviews. The 2300 milliamp hour battery, which is a non-removable battery, despite I removed it once when I took this thing apart, but still it's not a user removable battery. 2300 milliamp hours. This battery was excellent, apparently, according to the reviews that I found online. Now this battery is old, so it's dropping really fast, but back in the day, this was one of the best battery lives you could find in a mid-range phone in 2014. So the standby times and the talk times I got for this phone are kind of weird, the data I have online, but I'm still gonna say it. The standby time is 595 hours on 2G, so 595 hours on 2G, but 641 hours on 3G. That doesn't make too much sense, but this is what's available online, so I'll go with it. So usually 2G uses way less power than 3G, but whatever. Talk time is 11 hours and 20 minutes on 2G and 12 hours and 10 minutes on 3G. So again, pretty strange. But then again, I'm pretty sure these websites did these tests, and this is how that phone, this is how the test phone they were using at the time performed. So I guess their information is somewhat correct. It also, they have stated separately, because this is a Sony somewhat Walkman-ish phone. It's not a Walkman phone, but still, it has Sony Walkman DNA in it. Look at the music player. It still has Sony Walkman DNA. So it has a music playback time of around 37 to 38 hours. And like I said said earlier, the reviews on the battery life were actually very good. I'm just surprised that the 3G performance is better than the 2G performance. Again, I can't say those numbers are wrong because all those websites, for example, GSM Arena, Phone Dog, etc., they did tests on these phones back in the day, and their tests are very accurate. So I'm going to go with those numbers, even though they don't make any sense since 2G uses way less energy than 3G. But yeah, I guess that's about it I can say with this phone. There's nothing special that differentiates this phone from anything else that was on the market at the time. It was a pretty mid-range, a pretty decent mid-range phone with, well, I won't say decent, pretty excellent mid-range phone with a great camera, water resistance, and a great UI as well, as with all Sony phones. Anyway, as usual, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I would thank you for watching it as well. Don't forget to leave a like on this video and hit that subscribe button as well if you like the content of this video and you want to see more stuff like this. Also check out my social media down in the description below. Thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in my next video.